Thank you. So I didn't mean this to be a lecture, but I should start by saying I can't compete with Andrew in terms of how far my voice carries. So if you want me to use a microphone, just let me know.
Okay, give it a try.
You want me to?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I prepared just a few slides in order to leave a lot of space for questions and to go a little deeper in the direction that you feel is interesting. So Technion was founded in 1927 as an institute to educate engineers, and became eventually a research and education university of the kind that you are familiar with in the United States. The original language of teaching was supposed to be German. That was the technical language of the time. And there was a very large argument going on for years. I think the nicest story was the end of the argument was that they agreed that the teaching would be in Hebrew. And we had a number of teachers who did not know Hebrew, read Hebrew transcribed in German so that they can teach. They have no idea what they're talking about, literally. We have about 12,000 students now. We're about the same size as MIT. It's an institute of technology, so we teach all the engineering disciplines, all the science disciplines. We also have architecture, which is not exactly engineering, and a medical department, actually not on campus. The number of faculty is small relative to what you would expect from American university. This is something which is peculiar, I think, to Israel. The resources are much smaller, so we have to teach more students. I think Technion is fairly famous for being part of the revolution in Israel that created, changed Israel from a country that specializes in oranges to a country that specializes in chips. And that was a transition that took about 1 decade. It was very, very, very fast. It was a combination of a lot of components. If you want to learn more about it, I recommend this book, which is something written by journalists, so it's not a scientific book, but it has a lot of very good points and very interesting points about how you create a nation which has the second largest concentration of startups in the world, second only to Silicon Valley. The number of companies that started in Israel and are registered in the stock exchange in New York is second only to the United States and Canada. It's bigger than everybody in Europe combined. It is a country of about 8 million people. So the country is very technological. What kids dream about is to start up something and become rich. They don't think about being a lawyer, or not as much as in other countries. I want to explain in a little slide why we think higher education as a way to educate engineers has an inherent problem that has to be changed in a very dramatic way. So the Jacobs Institute is part of Cornell Tech. Cornell Tech is trying to change the way education is done in this domain, the digital domain. And Jacobs Institute is the sandbox or the playground to try out things which are a little beyond what the university would feel comfortable doing. So let's look at what happens in terms of the rate at which things change. Industrial revolution is something that started many years ago, and actually it took quite a long time until it had an influence to the full extent and over a large percent of the population. The personal computer, which you can argue is not quite the next revolution, but certainly one of the biggest revolution after that. The computers that served industry started only 30 years earlier. That started in 1980, and it took something like 10 years for it to achieve the same prevalence comparable to what happened with industry. And then came the internet, which changed the way we communicate, and that was only 15 years later. And social networks, which is something that doesn't apply to me or anybody who is more than 2/3 my age, but is a way of life for young people. That actually started in 2007. I gave a lecture a few weeks ago to a large group of young people and asked for a show of hands, can anybody imagine a world without Google? No Google, no Facebook, no smartphone. Everything started around 2007. That was 7 years ago. So the rate at which revolutions happen increases very fast. Now let's see what happens to the education of the people who are going to educate the engineers. So here it is. Somewhere around 22 years of age, you get a bachelor degree, it takes 5 years to get a PhD, and then you integrate at some university and you start building your career and your expertise. By the time you're 40, you're very influential and you participate in deciding how education would work. Now take a look at the time it takes from the time you get a PhD to the time you start really influencing. That's about 13 years. That's more than the time between revolutions. So by the time you get there to influence, things you learn in your PhD are out of date. Now that's not true for mathematics, it's not true for biology, it's not true for the sciences. It's also not true for some kinds of industry. In the high-tech industry, this shows that there is some inherent problem. So we're trying to imagine different ways to educate people which don't suffer from this in terms of who are the people that are bringing in the education. And here's something that we are trying at the Jacobs Institute. So in Cornell Tech in general, there are different kinds of education programs. Right now, there's a Master of Engineering, which is very much oriented towards entrepreneurship and more rounded education than in any other place you would find, but it's still a Master of Engineering in computer science. It's within a discipline. In August, we're going to start an MBA program, which is very much geared towards high-tech entrepreneurship, but it's still within a discipline which is business. When we submitted our proposal to New York, we came up with an upside-down way of doing things, which is, let's look at the applications. What is it that we want to accomplish? So for example, all these social networks, all the technology and everything they do is around connective media. Connective media is about how we as individuals collect information, share information, transmit information. You take a picture, you put it on your smartphone, you share it with your daughter, your spouse, your friend, you tweet, you go to Facebook. So we produce information, we transmit information, we collect information, but this is not like a journalist, this is like an individual. So all the tools around connective media and about learning what individuals do and giving them tools is what we call connective media. So what is it that you need to know to work in connective media? And we have two other application domains which we're going to start in the future. 2015, we're going to start a similar program in the direction of healthier life. So there are some core technological fields that you have to know to be able to work in these areas. They revolve mostly around computer science, information sciences, and to a smaller extent, a little bit of electrical engineering, how sensors are built, how do you collect information. And then there's a very large number of other things that go into play in different parts of this picture. So in the center, we still have the core technologies. Everybody has to get some of that. Operations research is about analyzing the data. Business, I think, is obvious to everyone. But if you think about connective media, there's a lot of art and design when you build something that people should use. So you have to know something about that. And there are other things like communications in the soft sense, not technical. How do you communicate through a device? How do people behave? And that's sociology as a group. And how do people behave as individuals? And that's psychology. To become an expert on connective media, you have to get knowledge in all these domains, which are very separate. And if you look at universities, you'll find computer science is a discipline. It sits in one place with a set of teachers. Similarly, electrical engineering. And the sociology department is a different place And people in sociology really cannot talk to the computer scientists because they have a different language. They deal with different things, they have different concepts. They really find it very hard to communicate when they want to do something together. So we want our graduates to be able to talk to the people who understand sociology and to the people who understand computer science, so that they can go out and do something in that domain which is useful and have a good impact on society. It's even more pronounced in health sciences. If you do not understand how hospitals work and how the healthcare system works, and also something which is very different, how the human body works, you cannot use computer science technology to improve any of this, because you try to do that and you go to the hospital and you say, I'm an expert in computer science, I'll help you with your systems. And they say, okay, let us describe what our problems are. And they start talking, and the person is lost because he does not understand the basic concept. So this is the idea of what we call the hubs. They are about something which is very important today, maybe tomorrow. It's very, it can have a very large impact on society, maybe on the business side, maybe on non-profit organizations, maybe on the city, on government. We think it's important enough to create a program, but as you see, the program is to a large extent a modular one. And moreover, because the program does not sit within a department, it does not suffer from the aging process that you find in departments. So if you remember the slide I showed before about the average age of a professor, that's not the average age of a professor, that's the average age you start having influence. The average age would be somewhere between 45 and 50. And you can imagine that after spending 20, 30, 40 years in a discipline, your point of view on the world is through that discipline. If I want you to change something really quickly, that's very, very difficult. If you're associated with a hub, the definition of the hub is temporary. What we expect to happen is, in 5 years, maybe Connective Media would not pose any interesting problems, so we'll close this one and open something new. So the whole concept of the hubs and the whole concept of Jacobs Institute is to be a place that changes all the time and drives changes all the time and continues to produce both graduates and also a way of educating graduates, which can be learned and absorbed by other organizations so that we can improve the way people work in our society through these domains. This is the extent of slides I had, and I'll be happy to